Well, wait day, kindergartners. This week, I'm going to read a story for you from ancient Rome. And then I want you guys to draw a picture of your story and then save that drawing till next week. Next week, you'll turn it in, okay? Let's get started. This story is called Icarus and Daedalus, and I'm reading it from this book, Classic Myths to Read Aloud, by William F. Russell. Throughout all of Greece, Daedalus was known as the most skillful of men, a master craftsman, artist, architect, and inventor. Indeed, his fame had spread to the island of Crete, where King Minos had pleaded for Daedalus to build him a cage or prison that could hold the terrible monster called the Minotaur. This hideous beast devoured men, women, and children at his pleasure, and none in the land could destroy or even control him. Daedalus accepted this challenge and built for the king a large and fantastic maze he called the Labyrinth, whose winding passageways were so cunningly tangled up and twisted around that, once inside, you could never find your way out again. And so the Minotaur was trapped within this ingenious device, and Daedalus was praised as a genius and given great honors by the king. But King Minos was, after all, a tyrant, quick to anger at the slightest offense and cruel in his punishment of anyone who opposed him. And, before long, Daedalus fell out of the king's favor to such extent that Daedalus was imprisoned with his young son Icarus in a high tower. Although Daedalus and Icarus managed to escape from their cells, they could find no way to leave the island, because King Minos and his guards kept strict watch along the shore, permitting no ship to sail without the most careful search. Daedalus, however, was determined to use his skill and cunning to find some way to make his escape. At last, after watching the seagulls who soared far out of reach of Minos and his guards, Daedalus thought of a plan by which he could win freedom for Icarus and himself. "Though King Minos may block me off by land and sea," he said, "at least the sky still lies open, and that is the way we shall go." Both father and son then set about gathering as many feathers as they could find, feathers that had been dropped by the gulls along the shore. Daedalus then placed these feathers in a row, beginning with the smallest, with a shorter one just below each longer one, and with such care and precision that you could almost believe that the feathers had once come from just such a row. Each succeeding row was fashioned in the same delicate way, the feathers secured into a framework with thread and wax. Each framework was then given a gentle curve, and soon it was apparent that Daedalus, the master builder, had created a pair of wings, perfectly tailored to his own dimensions. When at last the work was done, Daedalus fastened the wings to his own shoulders, and after a few trial efforts, he found that by waving his arms in a bird-like motion, he could actually climb through the air. He held himself aloft, wavering this way and that, with the wind, against the wind, until, at last, like a giant fledgling, he had taught himself to fly. Settling to the ground once again, he immediately began to fashion another, smaller pair of wings for Icarus, and when the task was done, he taught his son what he had learned about their use. The morning brought with it a perfect wind by which to make their escape. Daedalus called to his son, and as he fitted the wings to the boy's shoulders, he gave him his final instruction. "Icarus, remember always to maintain a moderate height, for if you fly too low, the fogs and vapors will weigh down your feathers, And if you fly too high, the heat of the sun will surely melt them apart. The father's voice trembled and tears glistened in his eyes as he repeated his warning and then lifted himself aloft and flew ahead. But for Icarus, his father's warning simply went in one ear and out the other. Who could remember to be careful when he was about to fly for the first time? All that remained in his mind was the joy of escape and the thrill of performing what all children had dreamed about, but none had ever before accomplished. A few sweeps of his arms, and Icarus felt his feet leave the earth. A few more, and he was soaring behind his father, looking down on the shore and the ships and the astonished guards of King Minos. The shepherds and farmers who glimpsed them high above the treetops stopped their work and gazed in awe at what they thought must surely be gods. Apollo, perhaps with Cupid following close behind. At first there was terror mixed with joy in Icarus and Daedalus, for the wide vacancy of the air dazed them, and every glance downwards set their senses reeling. But gradually they began to master this power, and they became overjoyed with the ease and freedom of flight. Icarus, though, grew more than just comfortable in the air. He grew bold. He stopped following his father and began to soar higher and higher toward the sky. He forgot everything that Daedalus had told him about staying on a middle course and not flying too close to the sun. He thought only about wanting to see what it was like to touch the sky and to play among the stars. Poor Icarus! The nearer he flew to the blazing sun, the more its rays warmed the wax that held his feathers together. One by one they loosened and dropped away like so many snowflakes. Now, terrified, he fluttered his arms wildly, but there was not enough feathers left to hold him in the air. He cried out, "Father! Oh, Father! Save me, or I shall surely die!" But Daedalus was by now too far away to hear these plaintive cries, and so Icarus fell like a leaf tossed down the wind, down and down, calling his father's name all the while. But there would be no help, and the boy drowned in the sea below. When Daedalus saw that his son was no longer following him, he called out the boy's name in fear, but there was no reply. He sought high and low for the boy, but found only some feathers afloat on the water, and knew that Icarus lay in a watery grave. He flew on alone, bitterly cursing the skill that had allowed him to create this tragic invention, and when, at last, he arrived safely on land, he built a temple to Apollo, and there hung up his wings as an offering to the god, and never again did he attempt to fly. The end. Now it's time for you to go draw a picture of this story. Remember to hold on to that drawing until next week when you'll need to turn it in to me. Valete omnes.